She helped a man with a flat tire in the rain, not knowing he was a millionaire who'd show up to propose weeks later. The rain came down in sheets, loud and relentless against the windshield of Anna's car. It was almost midnight, and the road was nearly empty, swallowed in darkness save for the occasional flicker of streetlights struggling against the storm. She squinted ahead, trying to see through the blur, when her headlights caught a figure on the shoulder of the road. A man, completely drenched, stood beside a sleek black car with its hazard lights blinking and one tire clearly flat. He was struggling to loosen the lug nuts, his suit soaked through, hair plastered to his forehead. It was the kind of night no one should be out in, let alone changing a tire. Anna pulled over without hesitation, her tires crunching on the wet gravel. She grabbed her raincoat from the back seat, shoved the door open, and stepped out into the cold downpour. She jogged up to him, dodging puddles, her breath visible in the chilly night air. "Hey," she called out, raising her voice above the wind. "Are you okay?" The man looked up, startled, water dripping from his chin. His eyes were tired, wary, as if he hadn't slept in days. "I'm fine," he replied, though clearly he wasn't. His hands were trembling from the cold. She glanced at the flat tire and then at the tool in his hand. "That wrench won't work with these lug nuts. You need the right key." He sighed, dropping the wrench in defeat. "I called roadside assistance 2 hours ago. They said they'd come. No one did. I didn't think anyone would stop. I don't look very trustworthy out here like this, I guess." Anna gave him a quick once-over. Expensive watch, Italian leather shoes, but he looked hollow. Not dangerous, just lost. "Lucky for you, I've changed more than a few tires," she said, heading back to her car. From her trunk, she pulled out a toolkit, flashlight, and an old tarp. When she returned, he was still standing there, half shivering, unsure of what to say. Anna crouched down, positioned the flashlight between her teeth, and went to work. "You really don't have to do this," the man said, his voice softer now. Anna didn't look up. "If I don't, you'll be out here until morning. Besides, I've had a long shift, and I need to do one last good thing today." He crouched beside her. "You're a nurse?" "Yep. Night shift, geriatric wing. Lots of diapers, bad jokes, and the occasional thank you." He chuckled under his breath. It was the first time his expression lightened. "You don't even know my name." "Don't need to," she said, twisting a lug nut loose. "Helping someone doesn't require a resume." The rain poured harder. Her hands were slick with water and mud, but she kept working until the new tire was on and secure. She stood up, wiping her hands on her soaked jeans. "There, should hold up until you can get it properly replaced." The man looked at her in disbelief. "Why would you stop for a stranger at midnight in the middle of a storm?" She shrugged. "Because I'd hope someone would do the same for me if I were stranded." He reached into his coat, pulled out his wallet. "At least let me pay you." "No," she interrupted, gently but firmly. "Just pay it forward. Help someone else. That's all I ask." For a moment they stood in silence, the storm swirling around them. He stared at her as if trying to memorize her face, like it was something he'd been looking for in the wrong places all his life. Anna turned to leave. "Take care of yourself, all right?" She walked back to her car, climbed in, and drove off, disappearing into the storm. The man stood there, water running down his face, watching her taillights fade. He was a millionaire, Michael Langford, CEO of a tech empire once hailed as the mind of the future. But lately, his future had felt empty. He had driven away from everything that night, the press, the parties, the fiancée who left him when she realized his money couldn't fix her cold heart. No one had recognized him in weeks. But this woman, this stranger in the rain, had seen him. Not the millionaire, just the man with a flat tire. And something about that broke him, in the best way. 1 month earlier, Anna's apartment was small, tucked away above a quiet flower shop in a sleepy neighborhood. The wallpaper in her kitchen peeled at the corners, and her old kettle whistled like a tired train. But it was home. She hummed softly as she packed lunch into 3 separate containers, one for herself and 2 extras for the elderly patients she always made time for on her breaks. Her heart had always been soft for the forgotten ones, the people no one visited anymore, the ones who still kept photos of families who never called. Anna had been raised by her mother, a strong woman with tired eyes and hands worn from cleaning houses. Her father had left when Anna was 10, vanishing with little more than a note on the kitchen table. It read, "I'm sorry, I can't do this." She never saw him again. That absence had shaped her, deepened her empathy. She knew what abandonment felt like, how it gnawed at you in quiet moments. But instead of growing bitter, Anna had grown into kindness, unyielding, stubborn kindness. Her life wasn't glamorous. She often worked double shifts, came home exhausted, and lived paycheck to paycheck. But she believed in something bigger than comfort. She believed in people, in second chances, in goodness. Across the city, Michael Langford's life was a world apart, measured in stocks and startup deals, luxury condos and boardroom applause. But inside his penthouse, silence hung heavy. His assistant had just left, the echo of her heels fading down the hallway. The moment the door clicked shut, Michael slumped onto the leather couch, tugging at the silk tie that felt like a noose around his neck. It had been a month since the engagement was called off. Madeline had been everything society said he should want: beautiful, refined, connected. But in the end, she didn't love him. She loved the lifestyle, the parties, the penthouse, the promise of never working again. When he'd told her he wanted to step away from the company for a while, to travel, to rediscover what happiness even meant, she had laughed, then packed. "You're not yourself anymore, Michael," she'd said coldly. "I didn't sign up for the broke philosopher version of you." That night, he'd driven for hours with no destination. He hadn't told anyone where he was going. He just vanished. It was the first time in years he didn't feel watched. In the days that followed, Michael wandered from cheap motels to roadside diners, growing a beard and trading his tailored suits for hoodies and jeans. He left behind the world of polished surfaces, searching for something real. Meanwhile, Anna's life continued with quiet purpose. Every morning she woke before dawn to feed her elderly neighbor's cat. On weekends she read to dementia patients who no longer remembered their own names, but lit up when she walked in. She didn't have much, but she gave what she could. Her life was an offering, of time, of compassion, of presence. But even she had moments of doubt. Some nights, after caring for strangers all day, she'd lie awake wondering if anyone would ever care for her, if her goodness would ever be seen, really seen, not just appreciated. Michael, on the other hand, was learning what it meant to be invisible. No one asked for his autograph anymore. No one cared that he once negotiated billion-dollar deals. Without the suits, the sleek car, the entourage, he was just a man, and he wasn't sure he minded. He found himself helping strangers along his aimless route, pushing a woman's stalled car, buying coffee for a busker, giving away his watch to a father short on rent at a gas station. Each act chipped away at something cold in him. Still, there was an ache, a loneliness he couldn't name, something his money had never touched. He missed being known, not for his wealth, but for his heart. The one he'd buried under deadlines and expectations. 2 lives running parallel, 2 souls shaped by abandonment, aching for connection. And then came the rain. A stormy night on a deserted road, when a woman who had every reason to drive past stopped, and a man who had forgotten what real kindness looked like remembered. Neither of them knew it yet, but everything was about to change. The rain hadn't let up, and thunder rumbled low across the horizon as Anna packed up her toolkit, tossing the wet tarp into her trunk. Her clothes clung to her skin. Her hair was a mess of damp curls, but her face held that same calm warmth she always wore after doing something that mattered. Michael, still a little stunned, stood beside his car, looking from her to the newly changed tire like he couldn't quite believe what had just happened. "You didn't have to do that," he said again, quieter this time. His voice was more human now, stripped of pride. Anna leaned against her car door, catching her breath. "Maybe, but I wanted to. He stepped forward, pulling out his wallet once more. "Please, at least let me give you something for your trouble." Anna raised her hand and shook her head with a small smile. "No need. Honestly." His brow furrowed. "Then, can I at least know your name?" She hesitated, looking at him carefully, like she was weighing something deeper than just the question. And then she said softly, "Look, maybe tomorrow I'll be the one with a flat tire, or stuck in the rain, or just needing a kind word. Help someone else when that happens. That's more than enough." Michael blinked. He opened his mouth as if to respond, but nothing came out. She turned to get into her car. "Wait," he said quickly. Will I see you again?" Anna gave him a look, almost playful, almost sad. "This isn't a fairy tale," she replied with a chuckle. "You won't find me on some royal balcony. I'm just a nurse who saw a man in need." She got in, started her car, and with a quick wave through the window, pulled away. Her taillights disappeared into the wet night, swallowed by the storm. Michael stood there long after she was gone, the rain seeping into his clothes again, but he didn't move. He felt hollow in the strangest way, like something had been removed from his chest and replaced with something warm and unfamiliar. A stranger had helped him, expected nothing, asked for nothing, not even his name. She hadn't looked at him like a celebrity or a business mogul, or even a broken man, just someone who needed a hand, and now she was gone. He climbed into his car, turned the key, and sat in silence. Her voice echoed in his mind. "Help someone else when that happens. That's more than enough." Michael didn't know her name. He didn't know where she lived, or what kind of music she liked, or if she had a dog or a cat or someone waiting for her at home, but he knew he had to find her. He drove aimlessly that night, unable to concentrate on anything else. Her eyes, her voice, the way she moved, confident, kind, a little tired but still giving, had carved something into him. By the time morning broke through the storm, he was already planning. First, he went back to the spot they'd met, trying to remember her car. Dark blue sedan, older model, maybe a Toyota. He noted the security cameras at the nearby gas station, thinking maybe, just maybe, he could track her plate. He'd never done anything like this. Michael had always been the one chased, by investors, journalists, people hungry for a piece of his empire. But this wasn't about possession, it was about connection. He needed to thank her, needed to tell her she'd reminded him of something he thought he'd lost forever. Hope. That people could be good without expecting a reward. Back in his apartment, still damp and exhausted, he found himself staring out at the skyline. The city looked different now. Too tall, too cold. He thought of her again. The way she smiled with her whole face. The way she didn't flinch at the rain or his silence. Who was she? He didn't know it yet, but he would turn the city inside out to find her. This wasn't about fate anymore. It was about choice, and he had just made his. The next morning, Michael was back on that same rain-slicked stretch of road, his eyes scanning every detail he could remember. It was quieter now, the storm long gone, replaced by the soft gray light of early dawn. He pulled over where Anna had stopped the night before and stood in silence for a moment. "Where did you come from? Where did you go?" He retraced the road in both directions, looking for gas stations or businesses that might have caught something on camera. After visiting 3 spots, he found a small 24-hour gas station about a mile down the road. Inside, the clerk, a sleepy young man nursing a coffee, looked up as Michael walked in. "I was here last night. There was a woman who stopped to help me with a flat tire. She was driving an older blue sedan. Do you have any security footage I can check? Just want to see her license plate." The clerk narrowed his eyes, skeptical. "You know how weird that sounds, right?" Michael gave a soft, almost embarrassed laugh. "Yeah, I know. But she helped me when I really needed it. And I didn't get her name. I just want to say thank you." Something in his tone must have convinced the kid, because 10 minutes later they were both hunched over the grainy footage from the night before. "There," Michael pointed as Anna's car pulled into view, headlights cutting through the storm. The clerk paused the video and zoomed in on the license plate, barely visible but just legible enough. Michael scribbled it down like it was a lottery number. By noon, he had pulled every string he could think of to track the car's registration. A few calls, a couple favors, and finally he had a name: Anna Reed. His heart stuttered when he heard it spoken aloud by a friend in the DMV office. It sounded so normal, so real. His next step was the hospital. St. Joseph's Community Medical Center, listed as her employer in the registry. He walked into the hospital's main lobby, nerves buzzing like static under his skin. The woman at the front desk gave him a polite, practiced smile. "I'm looking for someone, a nurse. Anna Reed. I don't have an appointment or anything, I need to talk to her." The receptionist checked her screen. "I'm sorry, Mr. Langford," he replied automatically. She tilted her head slightly. "She's not in today. Actually, she's taken a 2-week leave. Family emergency, I think. Something about her mother being ill." Michael blinked. "Do you know where she went?" "I'm afraid I can't give out personal information about our staff." "Of course not." He nodded slowly, thanked her, and stepped back outside. The wind had picked up again. This time it wasn't rain, but a bitter chill that slipped under his coat. He stood on the sidewalk, cars passing, the hospital towering behind him like a wall he couldn't climb. She was gone. The moment that thought settled in, a weight pressed down on him. He'd come so close, tracked a name, a place, a lead, and now she was out of reach again. 2 weeks might as well have been forever. He didn't even know where she'd gone, some small town, he guessed, wherever her mother lived. But how could he find her without prying too deeply, without crossing a line she never gave him permission to cross? The whole world suddenly felt too wide. The city, the streets, the noise, none of it mattered. He didn't care about work, emails, deals. All he could think about was the way she'd smiled through the rain, hands covered in grease and mud, just helping. Michael sat on a bench outside the hospital, running a hand through his hair. He had spent years chasing things that glittered, but now, for the first time, he had found something that glowed, and he'd let it slip away. He told himself maybe it was meant to be just a moment, one night, a reminder that kindness still existed, that goodness could be real. But some part of him, deep, stubborn, and aching, refused to let go. Still, for now, she was gone, and Michael, who had once believed he could control anything, could only sit and wait in the quiet, with nothing but her name and the echo of her voice in the rain. The leaves had begun to turn. Golden reds and fading yellows danced in the crisp autumn wind as Michael pulled into the small parking lot of Meadowbrook Senior Living Center. It was a modest facility on the outskirts of town, surrounded by pine trees and quiet streets. Far removed from the towering skyline he once called home. His Uncle Harold had recently been moved there for recovery after a minor stroke. Michael hadn't visited in months, caught up in the whirlwind of business and, more recently, heartbreak. But something inside him, perhaps softened by a rainy night and a certain stranger, told him it was time to show up. He signed in at the front desk and followed the nurse's directions down a softly lit hallway. As he passed the open doors, gentle voices floated from the rooms, chatter, laughter, the faint sound of music from a bygone era, and then he saw her, Anna. She was kneeling beside an elderly woman in a wheelchair, adjusting a blanket over her knees. Her voice was low and kind, her hand resting gently on the woman's shoulder. The smile on her face was real, the same one that had stayed with Michael through every sleepless night since that storm. For a moment he forgot how to breathe. She hadn't seen him yet. She stood, brushing hair from her face, and turned toward the hallway. Their eyes met. Time stopped. Anna froze mid-step, eyes wide, lips parted in surprise. Her hand instinctively reached up to tuck a strand of hair behind her ear. She blinked, almost as if she thought she was imagining him. Michael stepped forward, offering a hesitant, hopeful smile. "I wasn't expecting to see you here," he said gently. Anna found her voice, though it came with a trace of disbelief. "Neither was I. Expecting to see you." He glanced down the hall. "My uncle's here, Harold Langford. I come when I can, but not often enough." Anna nodded slowly. Her eyes softened, though there was still caution in them. "I volunteer here on weekends," she said. "It helps me stay grounded." Michael chuckled. That sounds exactly like you. She tilted her head. You barely know me. He looked at her, more serious now. I think I know enough to know I'd like to. There was silence between them. Not uncomfortable, but charged, full of unspoken things. He cleared his throat. Would you maybe have time for coffee? There's a place just around the corner. I'd really like to hear about everything I missed, starting with your name, properly this time. Anna hesitated. Then, with the faintest smile tugging at her lips, she said, Give me 15 minutes. They sat in a quiet corner of the cafe, 2 steaming mugs between them. The world outside moved on, but in that moment neither noticed. Michael told her about the night after they met, how he couldn't stop thinking about her, how he'd searched for her and eventually found her name. He told her about the hospital and how she had just vanished. Anna listened, surprised, touched, a little overwhelmed. I didn't think I'd left that much of an impression. You did, he said simply. You reminded me of who I used to be, who I wanted to be. She looked down, stirring her coffee. Most people don't look twice at a tired nurse in the rain. I did, he replied, eyes never leaving hers. And I still do. There it was, something delicate and unspoken settling between them. She didn't know what this was, not yet, but the weight she'd carried for years felt just a little lighter, and maybe, just maybe, this wasn't chance after all. Maybe some storms really do lead you somewhere brighter. It started with a simple scroll. Anna sat on her worn couch one quiet evening, sipping chamomile tea, her phone resting against her knees. Out of idle curiosity, she typed Michael's full name into the search bar. What she found made her stomach twist. Page after page filled her screen. News articles, interviews, business accolades. Michael Langford, tech mogul, founder and CEO, net worth estimated in the hundreds of millions. There was even a glossy photo of him with a woman in a designer gown on his arm. His former fiancée, according to the caption. Anna's breath caught. Her tea sat untouched. She'd never Googled him before. She hadn't wanted to. Everything between them had felt real, unscripted, simple, and maybe, just maybe, she'd liked believing he was just a man who'd needed help on a rainy night. Someone who saw her not as a nurse or a fixer, but just as Anna. Now, staring at headlines and photos of boardrooms, private jets, and award ceremonies, something inside her crumbled. Why didn't he tell me? The question repeated itself over and over, growing louder with each beat of her heart. Was it all a game? Was he testing her to see if she was different from the others? Some kind of twisted social experiment where he played the humble stranger? Or worse, did he think she was just another woman who'd change the moment she knew the size of his bank account? The next time Michael called, she didn't answer. He texted the next morning, "Hope your shift went well, thinking of you." She stared at the message but didn't reply. At the nursing home, she avoided common areas during visiting hours, just in case he showed up, and every time her phone buzzed, she felt a pang of guilt, followed by that ache of disappointment. She thought she'd met someone genuine. Meanwhile, Michael was confused. He hadn't heard from Anna in 3 days. Her warmth, once steady as the sunrise, had gone cold. Had he said something wrong? Moved too fast? On the 4th day, he drove to Meadowbrook, hoping to see her. Instead, a different nurse told him she was out running errands for the residents. "She's around," the nurse added with a smile. "Just a little hard to catch sometimes." Michael sat in the garden courtyard, waiting. When Anna finally stepped outside, a bag of prescriptions in hand, she stopped mid-step at the sight of him. Their eyes met. Hers were guarded. "Hi," he said softly, standing. She didn't return the greeting, just looked at him with that same cautious distance he hadn't seen since their very first meeting. "You didn't tell me," she said. He blinked. "Tell you what?" Her expression tightened. "Who you are, what you are." Understanding dawned slowly. He took a breath. "You Googled me." "I didn't mean to," she said, voice low. "I just wanted to know more about the man I thought I was getting to know, the man who needed help on a rainy night." He took a step closer, but she didn't move. "That is who I am, Anna." "No," she said quietly. "You're Michael Langford. Billionaire, CEO, the guy in GQ. You let me believe you were just—" He cut in, gently but firmly. "I never let you believe anything. I was just a guy with a flat tire, alone, tired, and more lost than I'd ever been in my life." Anna's eyes glistened. "But why not tell me later? Why keep it hidden?" "Because I was afraid," he said honestly. "Afraid that the moment you knew, everything would change. That you'd look at me like everyone else does, like a walking checkbook, not a person." She didn't answer. He stepped forward again, slowly. "I didn't come into your life to test you. You came into mine when I needed someone to remind me of who I used to be. You didn't care what I had. You cared that I was stranded in the rain. You saw me, Anna." She looked down, swallowing hard. He took one final step, voice soft. "You were the first light after the darkest days of my life, and if I lose you now, it'll be the greatest regret I've ever known." The silence between them trembled. Anna raised her eyes, and for the first time the hurt in them gave way, just slightly, to something else, something that still hoped. The rain had returned, not as a storm this time, but as a soft drizzle that dusted the earth like a memory. It was the kind of rain that whispered more than it shouted, the kind that made everything feel closer, quieter, more alive. Michael stood on the same stretch of road where their story had begun, the sky overcast, the trees lining the highway swaying gently in the breeze. His luxury car sat parked on the shoulder, hood popped, a spare tire propped carefully beside it. Everything was arranged to look familiar, almost identical to that night weeks ago, only this time the flat was staged, and this time he wasn't stranded. He paced a little, checking his watch, his palms slightly damp, not from the rain, but from nerves. For all his business deals, public speeches, and headline moments, this was the most important thing he had ever planned. He had no guarantee she'd come. It was a risk, but love, he had learned, was made of risks. Then, in the distance, he saw headlights cutting through the mist. A dark blue sedan approached, slowing as it neared. The driver's silhouette, slim, familiar, made his heart jump. The car eased to a stop behind him, and Anna stepped out. She stood still for a moment, umbrella in hand, her expression caught between confusion and disbelief. "Michael?" she called. He turned, already soaked, and smiled. She walked toward him slowly, the rain speckling her coat, her eyes locked on his. "What are you doing here?" she asked softly, though her voice trembled. He took a breath, the kind that reaches all the way down to your soul. "I figured if I was going to ask you the most important question of my life," he said, "it should be where it all began." She blinked, lips parted. Michael took a step forward, then another, until he was standing right in front of her. The rain gathered on his lashes, slid down his cheeks. He dropped to one knee. Anna gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. Michael reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. He opened it to reveal a ring, simple, elegant, timeless. But his eyes never left hers. "Anna," he said, voice raw and steady, "that night in the rain, I thought you were just helping me fix a flat, but you were fixing something deeper. Something I didn't even know was broken." She shook her head slowly, tears already forming. "You didn't care who I was or what I had. You just saw a person in need and you showed up. And since that moment, I haven't been able to stop thinking about you." Rain ran down her cheeks, mixing with her tears. Michael continued, his voice trembling now. "I don't need help with a tire tonight. I don't need saving. What I need is you. For the rest of my life, every quiet moment, every storm, every sunrise." He held up the ring. "Will you marry me, Anna?" Her heart pounded so loudly she could barely hear the rain anymore. For a second she just stared. At him, at the road, at the sky that had once introduced them. Then she dropped the umbrella and stepped forward, the ring forgotten between them. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, of course, yes." He stood, and she threw her arms around him, both of them laughing, crying, soaked to the skin. The ring slipped onto her finger between kisses, between promises. They stayed there for a long time, two people on a forgotten road, held together by fate and rain and the extraordinary magic of a simple act of kindness. The chapel inside Meadowbrook Senior Living Center had never seen so much joy. White ribbons adorned the chairs, handmade paper flowers lined the aisle, and a string quartet composed of 3 retired music teachers played softly in the corner. The scent of fresh roses mingled with the warm smell of lemon cake from the modest reception table. It wasn't a grand venue. There were no chandeliers, no tuxedoed waitstaff, no red carpet, but the room overflowed with something money could never buy: heart. Anna stood at the front of the chapel in a simple, flowing ivory dress. Her hair was swept into soft curls, pinned with tiny pearls. She held a bouquet of wildflowers, gathered from the gardens she tended with the residents. Her smile was radiant, serene. A woman standing not just in love, but in peace. Michael, in a navy blue suit that had somehow never felt as perfectly tailored as it did today, stood waiting as the music shifted. His eyes never left her as she walked down the aisle, her steps light, her face glowing. The room was filled with faces marked by time, every seat taken by someone whose life Anna had touched. Mrs. Harris, from room 203, clutched a handkerchief. Mrs. Winfield dabbed her eyes behind oversized glasses. Even stoic Mr. Delgado, who rarely spoke more than 2 words a day, had a smile tugging at the corners of his lips. These were her people, and now they were his too. As Anna reached him, Michael took her hand with reverence, like it was something sacred. The officiant cleared her throat, her voice kind and warm. "We are gathered here today to witness a love that didn't begin in ballrooms or through dating apps, but on a rainy night on a forgotten road with a flat tire and a helping hand." A few chuckles rippled through the room. When it came time for vows, Michael turned to Anna, his hands trembling slightly as he held hers. "I spent years believing love was something to be earned, proven, negotiated," he began, his voice thick. "But you showed me that love is something you give, freely, fearlessly." He paused, breathing deeply. "That night I was lost, not just on the road but in my life. You didn't just help me fix a flat tire, you helped me find my way back to myself. You are my compass, my calm, my hope. I vow to spend the rest of my life becoming the man worthy of the woman who stopped in the rain." There wasn't a dry eye in the room. Anna, already teary, smiled as she took a breath. "I never imagined that pulling over that night would lead me here," she said. "You were just a stranger in the rain. I didn't know your name. I didn't know your story. But something told me you needed kindness." She squeezed his hand gently. "And now I know the truth. You were never just a man with a flat tire. You were the answer to a question I didn't know my heart was asking." She leaned closer, her voice a whisper only he could hear. "Who would have thought a flat tire would lead me to a love for life?" Michael laughed softly through tears. When the officiant pronounced them husband and wife, the room erupted into applause. The residents cheered, a few nurses wiped their eyes, and someone in the back whistled. They shared their first kiss as husband and wife beneath twinkling fairy lights strung by volunteers, and then Michael held out his hand. "May I have this dance, Mrs. Langford?" Anna giggled. "You may, Mr. Langford." They swayed slowly as the quartet played a tender tune. Around them the room seemed to shimmer, not with lights, but with love. Residents clapped in rhythm, some holding each other's hands, others simply beaming. It wasn't a wedding that would make magazine covers, but it was unforgettable, and as they danced, Anna rested her head on Michael's shoulder, her heart full. Across the room, someone snapped a photo, a moment frozen in time, the girl who gave without expecting, and the man who finally understood what it meant to be truly rich. A small wooden sign placed near the guest book captured the spirit of the day in simple words. Sometimes, helping someone doesn't just change their life, it changes your own. And for Anna and Michael, it had changed everything. Forever. Sometimes it's not the grand gestures that change our lives, but the quiet, selfless moments when we choose to help a stranger in the rain. Anna didn't stop that night expecting anything in return. She stopped because kindness was who she was. And Michael? He found something that night he never found in boardrooms or wealth. He found someone who saw him for his heart, not his fortune. Their story reminds us a simple act of compassion can lead to the love of a lifetime. And when we choose kindness, we don't just change someone else's world. Sometimes we change our own. If this story touched your heart, we invite you to subscribe to Soul-Stirring Stories, where love, hope, and humanity come alive in every word. Click subscribe and join us for more real, heartfelt stories that heal the soul. Because here, every story is a reminder that goodness still exists. Thank you for watching, and remember, be the light in someone's rainy night.